Game 4 is about as close to a must-win for the Winnipeg Jets against the Dallas Stars as there gets.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are chatting about game number 4. And this is ahead of, some practice lines from warm-ups on Tuesday and stuff, so we don't have officially updated lines, but I'm going to assume that for the most part, the Jets are probably going to be going into Game 4 with very similar lines. If there is a switch, obviously that's going to be a little bit of a surprise just because Arniel doesn't tend to do that, but, we'll kind of look at things as we go throughout the next couple of days. But this is going to be a pivotal moment for the Jets. Game 4 in a must-win environment, really, an away win that the Jets have yet to achieve this postseason. It's a moment that I think could really define the rest of the series. And of course, amidst all of this, there are potential line change suggestions that we've got, and we have to ask a really big question. I feel like throughout the playoffs, I've said this several times, this game is the real test. This moment is the real test. And I keep wondering when I can stop saying that. When will the Jets consistently answer the question to where I don't feel like I have to keep saying, okay, this next moment, this is the one where the team will lock in and start playing consistently great hockey from this point on. I really haven't been able to nail that down yet. And it's getting to the point where I sort of wonder if we're ever going to hit that point. So we'll chat about that a little bit later, but let's start with Game 4, right? This game, if ever there was a real must-win moment in this series, it probably feels like Game 4. Game 3, you had a little bit of a margin for error. You took one at home, great. 1-1 series split going into Game 3 on the road. You expected to some degree that there would probably be some turbulence, right? Dallas is a really tough team. For whatever we can say about the Jets outplaying them at even strength, which has kind of been true of a couple of the games of the series, it hasn't necessarily mattered when a guy like Mikko Rantanen immediately steps up and the Jets power play can't figure out the really, really good Dallas Stars PK. It just feels like their stars have outmatched ours, and it's really a couple of very specific stars, pun intended, that have really risen above the crowd. You look at a guy like Rantanen really putting the team on his back. Hintz has been pretty effective. Ottinger, I think, has had some good moments. I don't think he's been nearly as strong as maybe the score lines look, but his team has done a really good job clearing the crease and making those extra saves if he maybe slips a little bit, right? It's not quite been the same on the other end of the ice. So Game 4 feels like a really big moment for the Jets to try and figure out if they can actually win a game on the road. If they can't, then the series is probably over because Dallas has already proven time and time again, they don't care whether they're at home or on the road. They can get the job done one way or another. They've got an interesting group where there's a lot of mixtures of players who really haven't had a lot of playoff experience and quite a few guys who have been here many, many, many times before. So they've been through the dance. They know it well. This is a team that's been in the Cup Finals within the past, 6 or 7 years. So they've gotten deeper than the Jets have. They've gone deeper in the postseason generally than Winnipeg has overall. And this is a team that's very good. And so if you're coming into Game 4 with a mindset of just doing what you've done before, that's probably not going to be good enough. I think Winnipeg really needs to, for one, bring the body. They kind of got away from that in Game 3, and it felt like Winnipeg was, in some ways, chasing the play a bit more. I didn't think that they were nearly as strong, and I don't think that they were quite as effective in managing their physicality and kind of stuffing some of those neutral zone transitions. Dallas had a little bit more mobility and freedom to move, and that's not really something that benefits the Jets, because when the Stars get up to speed and start moving laterally and getting that puck movement and cycle game and counter game rolling, it is very tough to slow them down, even if their blue line is not 100%, right? So this is a moment for Winnipeg to try and slow the game down in some ways, get Dallas into the corners, and outwork them and outwill them. The Stars may have us beat in certain matchups, and certainly in the talent department, they've got a bit more up front than the Winnipeg Jets do. I think that is still a point, to a point true. You look at who they match up in their top 9 against the Jets' top 9, and yeah, they do kind of on paper have more talent than the Jets do. But that doesn't mean that Winnipeg can't still win its way, and I think that's a really crucial thing. The Jets have shown time and again this year that sometimes Winnipeg's talent hasn't always been the most important part. It is a huge part of their game, don't get me wrong, but Winnipeg is a team that wins by committee, by rolling 4 lines, by keeping the pressure on, and forcing your opponents into mistakes. If you get away from that game, it's not the same Jets team, and I think that this game 4 really has to be Winnipeg getting back to the basics and going to what they're familiar and comfortable with. And I think the biggest question I have is, when something goes wrong, will they collapse like they have every other road game? It's been a really consistent theme where something goes in, or you have an unfavorable decision, or you get yourself into some penalty trouble, and everything just completely spirals and snowballs out of that, and suddenly Winnipeg is on the back foot in the game and eventually in the series. They got themselves out of that jam in the Blues series, and I thought that would be the last time we'd really have to have that conversation. Not really been the same in the Star series, unfortunately. Dallas has put the Jets under different kinds of stress, and in some ways, it's not really been as intense of a series, but I think Winnipeg, maybe runs the risk of not playing like their lives depend on it at times. And I don't think that's necessarily what's happening. Maybe, the fatigue is kind of catching up to both teams, but it does feel at times like in some of these periods, there's maybe been a little bit of a lack of intensity, maybe not quite as much of the push that we're used to. So yeah, I just don't know what's missing, right? And a part of me thinks it's partly the lineups, right? I feel like the Jets need a little bit of an infusion into this lineup. It's probably why the trade deadline stuff is maybe making a little bit of a comeback in some of the conversations, not just for injury reinforcements, but also just the fact that the Jets' top 9 needs more finishing talent. They've got lots of guys who can do some real forechecking jobs and stuff, but they got to get more out of some of their guys. Niederreiter's been kind of hit or miss. Nemesnikov has had 1 or 2 really big moments, but generally speaking, you haven't noticed him that much. Perfetti this series has been very quiet. Ehlers is kind of hit or miss. He's getting there in some games, but in other games, he has some really rough ones. And so like a lot of the offense right now is kind of like the top line or bust, and that's not really sustainable. You'll occasionally get goals from the other lines, but you got to get some more consistent offense from somewhere. And it probably comes with rearranging your top 9. I think if we get the same top 9 that we've had for the past couple of weeks, I think it's going to be a problem. Now, you can leave the top line together. I think that's fine. CSV has generally played pretty well, but the middle 6 really needs a rethink. And I don't know if Arneal is ready to go there unless the Jets are facing some kind of elimination. So I want to talk about some thoughts I have on the middle 6 and how you can maybe juice it a bit. I know that none of this is really going to happen, but at this point, the Jets have to come up with something, because right now they're just really not getting enough. Even in some of these games where, yeah, they're still doing well and they're winning and they're getting the result, you got to find a more sustainable way going forward, especially when you are struggling this much on the road. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment. But before we do, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, as a Marylander, I'm used to cracking open crabs, so the idea of shelled pistachios is relatively appealing to me. I don't mind the extra work, really not any extra work, but you get a nice little treat inside, and they come with some great seasonings. But maybe you're somebody who's on the go, your lifestyle is always busy, and you need something fast, right? Pistachios, Wonderful Pistachios are here to help. They come in no-shelled varieties. They're a quick snack on the go. You grab them before work when you're dropping the kids off at school, or maybe when you're headed to the gym for a bit of a protein pick-me-up. And of course, it's a complete protein packed with all 9 essential amino acids. So join me and get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about some adjustments that I think the Jets kind of need to make to their middle six. The top line is not getting broken up most likely, and that's fine. I don't really mind that. But I think the Jets in general need to make some real changes. The middle six has been very hit or miss, very lackluster in a lot of these games. You'll have some moments of individual brilliance, and I think that that's great. But in terms of consistent play, I think we're really seeing some limitations. And part of it is, the line combinations. Some of it is also, the trade deadline maybe not bringing in some of the bigger reinforcements that Winnipeg was hoping for. It might not have fixed everything, but it would at least give the Jets more opportunities to explore different looks. One of the biggest things the Jets really need to change, though, their third line is not really doing it for me, right? It can have good moments, but ultimately that shutdown line isn't really doing enough offensively, and it's kind of been a problem that I've talked about before. I think Arniel really likes the idea of the Lowry line being your elite shutdown two-way unit that just grinds and pounds, and it does that sometimes. The problem is if they're not necessarily contributing goal scoring, their impact can be limited in a series like this that's more defined by those individual moments and counters that catch the opponent napping, right? And I think that's where the Lowry line has occasionally struggled to really stake its claim. It can win board battles and wall battles and stuff, but in general, you don't really see loads and loads of offense. Appleton has struggled to really do much with possession of the puck. He's always on the score sheet somehow, but I think if you actually look at the moment-to-moment shifts and stuff, it's been a real mixed bag. Niederreiter has had some really awful periods, none worse than probably Game 3 first period, where he took a penalty not even 30 seconds into the game. A really sloppy one, too. He redeemed himself later, but it just wasn't enough. And Lowry has generally been good the past couple of games, but you notice in the first round, he really wasn't himself. And he talked about it, too. He said he wasn't really happy with his performance. And so, look, I know that Arniel likes the idea of 27, 7, and 91, but put Lowry back up there, man. It's time. I think you really need to put Lowry and Ehlers together. You can probably put almost anyone else at wing. I would probably not recommend putting Appleton in that role. I think you want somebody who's a little more gifted on the puck, whether it's Perfetti or maybe you try Iafallo again. Iafallo and Lowry have had good work together. I think that there's something in that potential trio. I certainly wouldn't be averse to it. If you have 27, 17, and 91, I think that that's another really good trio. I just think you need to get Lowry some new wingers to work with. Adam is still doing a lot of his usual work on the forecheck, and everyone can debate whether he's really a 2C or not. It doesn't really matter. He's the only option we really have. We have no other centers of his caliber on this team past him and Scheifele. So unless somebody has a brilliant idea, I guess you could try Barron. But recently Barron hasn't really looked like the same player from the first round either. So I don't know. What are your options? You could try Cole Perfetti at center, and Arniel's never going to do that. So with that kind of being the consideration, put your bruiser with your skill. And I know that sounds very silly, but Lowry is a very smart player. He obviously is more known for his physicality and strength, but I think where he tends to not really get enough credit is in the way that he attacks space, right? He's just a bulldozer into those areas, but he's a smart bulldozer. And I think he knows how to take advantage of a guy like Ehlers who will carve around the perimeter and then go towards the slot. He's a space creator and can open up those options for Ehlers or Iafallo. Iafallo can still finish. He's a good grinder. He'll go right to the net. He's fine with tipping pucks. He's a very versatile do-it-all player who offers that defensive stability alongside Lowry. Maybe try it, right? You don't really have too many options at this point. And if your middle six really isn't able to get things consistently going, you're going to have a real tough time. It can't just be the top line or bust. Much as they've been able to do a lot of stuff throughout this playoffs, even when, a lot of the top line was injured, You just need some sort of stability from your middle six to keep you going. The third line is a tougher question, but that's probably where Barron starts to become more of a factor. Again, I know that this isn't going to happen, but Morgan Barron as your 3C at full health in this lineup makes a lot of sense. Try Niederreiter, Barron, and maybe Perfetti or Iafallo. I really don't care who it is on the right side. Just find somebody. And I think the rest of that trio will start to cook. I don't think that you want to look at this as a purely shutdown unit. You need offense from everyone, right? Your top nine is going against the Stars, and maybe the Stars don't quite have as much offense coming out of their top nine as they did in other series or the regular season, but at any moment they can. And in the home game that they had, they were a lot faster than they were in Winnipeg. So this is a team that if you start to let them skate through you, it's going to be a real problem. And the Jets need to be able to skate with them back, right? And that's where I think you need that extra layer of offense. Nemestikov as your fourth line center, I think would be elite. Make him your 4C, pair him with Appleton and Tanev or whoever. Again, I'm not really fussed about that. Just find whatever trio works there. Make that combo your fourth, and I think that they can do a really solid job locking things down late in games. But don't ask your middle six as constructed to do all this work when they're not really capable of doing it consistently. Again, they have some games where they're brilliant, some games where they just don't look like anyone's on the same page. And I feel like in this series, when the margins are so narrow for the Jets against a very experienced, very difficult to crack Stars team, you just have to try and experiment more. You have to shake things up. And I know that Arniel is loath to do that, but instead of waiting towards game 7 for those switches to really kick in, maybe give it a shot now, right? At worst, your game really can't get much worse than it's been on the road. If you go into game 4 with the same lineups, you probably have a reasonable expectation of what's going to happen. Again, the Jets have gotten really far with this trio or with these three lines as they are at home. But, when you go on the road, you don't have last change. And that's been a real problem for the Jets. The moment that they are not in control of those matchups, their weaknesses and stuff start to get highlighted in bigger relief. And so I think for this moment, it's really important for Arniel to make these adjustments and try and experiment. I know that he's not comfortable with doing it. I know that he sometimes worries about pissing the room off. But maybe you should get them angry, get them riled up, get them, in a position to really feel like they've got a point to prove to the staff. These guys have come through so much already, and I'm sure that they're feeling incensed by game 3 in a lot of ways, whether it was their own effort after that goal review or, the officiating feeling like it's against you. But at some point, you're just going to have to bite the bullet and get things done. All these other teams that have had adversity have had to do the same thing. Imagine how Draisaitl feels after scoring a game-winning own goal with like 0.4 seconds left against Vegas. Edmonton perhaps had them on the ropes. They had a chance to put them on an elimination track in game 4. And now, the Knights suddenly have an in. And it feels like maybe, just maybe, Vegas can tip this series on its head if it can steal one more road game. So, the Jets aren't the only team that's dealing with all this stuff. You got to just buckle down, grit your teeth, and make it through somehow. And I think if you put your lineups in a more optimal position and a better, arrangement for any sort of matchup that you're dealing with, it'll give the Jets more flexibility. I think Winnipeg right now has kind of, again, pigeonholed itself into a couple of very clear concepts. It's been, an Arniel and Bones thing for a while now. Arniel was a little more flexible with it, and I think that showed in certain moments. Now would be a good time to experiment again. And I get it, right? It's really hard to do that in the postseason, and probably why you wanted to try this stuff more in the regular season. But you have a sample size of enough from the current lineup and from some impromptu lineups in other games to where it might not be the worst idea to change things. Do I suspect I know where Arniel will go? Yeah, probably to the same well. And maybe it'll work this time. I mean, it's worked in other games before. The Jets have had results, but so far, the Jets still haven't won on the road. And until they do that, you don't really know how serious of a cup contender they are. The Jets just aren't going to be perfect at home. They've finally lost at home against the Stars, a team that's gotten further than Winnipeg in previous years. And so that they're good enough to win in Winnipeg. You can't give them any more games. Steal game 4 on the road, go back home, and take care of business, right? If the Jets fall in game 4, I'm going to be honest, prognosis is looking like an early out again. The second round is more respectable than losing in the first round, and it's against a team that, again, is a cup contender. But the Jets, in my mind, can outplay the Stars team. We've seen them do it at times. They have moments. Find a way to make adjustments and prepare for game number 5. Game 4, it is what it is if they lose. But I just think that this team has too much talent and has come too far to let some old habits and things cloud the way of what should be a really deep run. So I want to chat about, all of this, kind of factoring in some of the mental aspect of the game too, because I feel like I keep calling games like these huge tests, right? Tests at the moment, the test of the playoffs. And yet I keep finding myself saying this, and I just want one of these to solidify the Jets as a contender, playing consistently great hockey. We haven't had that moment yet, and maybe we just won't. We'll chat about that in just a little bit. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just chatting about, whether or not the mental aspect of what's happening with Winnipeg is a repeating cycle. Is this something where the Jets are actually going to get past some of their hard test games and start playing consistently great hockey? Truth be told, I don't know the answer to that. I've watched the Jets a lot this playoffs, and they've come through some crazy stuff, right? Game 7 was insanity. One of the greatest moments in franchise history, one of the most fun moments we've ever had as fans, and it put the Jets in an amazing position to keep going, right? Winnipeg got itself, the series win when all hope looked lost. And I thought that after some really difficult tests that the Jets did at times pass and at times failed, especially on the road, Game 7 would be the thing that would let them move on and move past their demons and start winning games their way again. Fast forward to Game 4, we're kind of seeing some of that. We've seen more consistently good play from Hellebuyck. We've seen generally better play from the Jets at even strength, but there are still some big problems that continue to persist. And I think the Game 3 away collapse after the goal review is really emblematic that there's just still something with this team that's fragile. And I don't know what it is, right? I don't know if it's the mentality aspect. I don't know if it's the pressure that's getting to the team. I would have thought that after some of the stuff they've come through that, they would maybe have moved past some of the stuff. And, I don't want to discredit Dallas's efforts here because that's had a huge part in all of this, right? The Stars are a very good team, and you're just not going to have an easy time against them. But I think the specific way that the Jets start to collapse under pressure, especially with the really rapid successions of goals conceded, is again a concern, right? It's happened so many times with the squad that it's just a little bit of a pattern now. And I worry that, it's going to be one of the things that puts them out of the postseason before I really feel like their time is due. I think this team can go to the Cup Finals. I really believe that. But this whole thing of me having to keep saying Game 5, Game 6, Game 7 is the real test, they're all tests. And at some point, I just wonder if the Jets can not only complete the assignment, but keep doing it without being every game a test, right? You shouldn't have to look at it as the defining franchise moment every time their Jets are faced with adversity. Every game shouldn't be a referendum on the franchise's ability to make it through another playoff series. And yet that's kind of how it's felt almost every game this playoffs. I don't know if it's ever going to change. And maybe that's just sort of the nature of the Jets because they've had so many previous playoff failures before that we're all kind of on guard for it. But I would like to feel utmost confidence again. And it's hard. You're facing top-end teams now. Everyone past the first round is going to be in the contender category. Even the Blues were good enough to give the Jets absolute fits. And so, if the Stars are Cup contenders, it's understandable that, the Jets might be already down in the series. But Winnipeg just feels, I don't know, like there's something still slightly missing. And maybe at the end of Game 4, I'll have a very different tune and I won't be as worried. But the fact that it keeps coming up with this team, it's enough of a concern to make me wonder just how deep this team is really going to go this year. The mental fragility away versus home is such a weird split for Winnipeg. You don't really see them have this problem on their own ice. Even in Game 1 when they lost, they didn't collapse. They didn't have these moments. They had some individual mistakes and things, but nothing on the level of a complete collapse where they start conceding, 3, 4, 5 goals in rapid succession. That stuff just wasn't happening on their own ice. And so for it to happen on the road, I just wonder if there's going to be a stop to the bleeding, right? Is there going to be a road game where they finally play a complete 60 minutes or close to it and look like a cup contender again? I don't know. That continues to be an outstanding question for me. I don't really know how I feel about it. I've stopped obviously giving predictions of score lines for these games because it just continues to be a crapshoot with this team. There are some games where I feel confident in their home efforts, but the moment they go on the road, I can't tell you what's going to happen. And again, I thought game 3 was going to be a really improved performance. And for parts it was. And then, the old Jets showed up in the playoff away games and it was a 5-2 scoreline. And so I don't know when the bleeding stops for the Jets on the road. I really don't. I wish I did. I wish I had a clearer thought process on this, but I'm just frustrated feeling like every game on the road is some kind of a referendum when I just want to watch them play good hockey. That's all I really want to see from them. If they lose a good competitive game, I could live with that. I accept it. But to have these collapses continually, I worry about it, I just wonder if that's going to be ultimately what undoes them when, the final bell tolls. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that this team is mentally fragile? After everything that we've seen with them, I really don't like going there because I feel like this team has shown consistently some great fight back, and I don't like the idea that I doubt them. I really feel like this team has earned more than that, and yet history and some of their own playoff performances in these away games are making it very hard for me to give them a lot of the benefit of the doubt. Be curious to know your thoughts on all of this. Drop your thoughts on sort of these road performances in the comments below. What would you adjust? What lines would you change? Who do you really think needs to step up for this team? Is it a coaching issue? Is it a leadership issue? What do you feel has been the biggest problem? Do you think it's Hellebuck still? For my take, I don't really feel like that's kind of what happened in game 3. Not that he helped on the latter couple of goals, but I feel like the collapse was a team-wide thing. And it was like the moment that the decision went against them, they just started to come apart at the seams. So again, very curious to know your thoughts on this. Drop those in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Of course, Wednesday we'll have a recap of Game 4. I hope I get to talk about a win. I really don't know what I'm expecting at this point. Watch the Jets just walk into Dallas and smack them around. I don't know. They always do something crazy and very unexpected, so maybe that's what's going to happen again. Trying to figure this Jets team out at this point, it's a losing effort. You're never going to do it, so do what I do, throw your hands up, and just hope for the best. But for tonight's episode, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow with more Jets playoff coverage, and as always, go Jets, go.